Welcome back to another episode of Divorce at Altitude. This is Ryan Kalamaya. This week, we're going to get into something that I have been looking forward to discussing for quite some time, and it's cryptocurrency and how cryptocurrency can be involved in a divorce and what the various issues are. And we're fortunate to be joined by an expert attorney in Colorado who can walk us through cryptocurrency. And let me tell you a little bit about Anthony Garcia. He's Colorado and California licensed attorney. He's a solo practitioner that focuses his practice on commercial and probate litigation. Anthony provides cryptocurrency consulting for clients and other lawyers, people like me who may be encountering legal issues related to cryptocurrencies that are beyond their expertise or experience. He's an avid cryptocurrency investor himself since 2017, and Anthony is well versed in the ever changing landscape of cryptocurrency and blockchain, including the rapid growing areas of decentralized finance, decentralized autonomous organizations, and non fungible tokens, NFTs. So, we're going to talk about if Eric Wolf, our hypothetical divorce client, goes through a divorce and cryptocurrency is involved, either him or Melanie have cryptocurrency. But without going on too long, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, I've been really looking forward to having a guest on and talking about this subject. Before we started recording, we were talking about that at the time I was really interested in it because it was all over the news because cryptocurrency had just been going to the moon. But with the market at the time of this recording, it's really soured. So people see cryptocurrency in the news, but why don't you start us off for listeners that don't understand what cryptocurrency is? Can you tell us a little bit on like a macro level? What is current cryptocurrency so that we can have a general understanding of what it is as an asset itself?
Right. Cryptocurrency, if you think about it as perhaps a distributed ledger, and when I say that to people, I know that's kind of like technical speak, but the way I explain it is imagine if you have just a regular accounting ledger, um, the same kind people have used for decades, but you hand it off to everyone who participates in a particular blockchain or cryptocurrency network. And everyone has real-time access to this ledger at the same time. Every time there's a transaction, it's updated for everyone. And what that allows is essentially everyone to trust that what is on this network or ledger is exactly what it means to be, or purports to be really. And so what that means is that um, you can be certain that a transaction that occurs on this blockchain network, as we'll call it, has actually occurred. And contrary to what some people who don't really understand what it means, there's no physical asset of any kind. There's nothing that you can touch with your hands. Um, the most popular cryptocurrency is called Bitcoin. There's no actual coin. It's something I actually struggle to explain to my parents who don't understand this stuff. It's it's an asset that lives entirely upon the internet. Now, the underlying technology, it's important to distinguish it between some of the terms that we'll be talking about. Blockchain is what people might have heard. That refers to the underlying technology itself, this distributed ledger system that I've been talking about. Cryptocurrency is an application of the blockchain technology to finance or to money. There's many different kinds out there that your listeners have probably heard of, Bitcoin being the most popular. There's also Ethereum, XRP, Cardano, the list goes on. They're always in the news, really. And each of those are considered their own networks. So if you want to own, quote unquote, Bitcoin, you have to be a participant in the network, and that gives you access to the ledger, basically. Now, the components that I think are really important for your listeners to listen to understand really is that there's two aspects of this that that can be tricky. when you are a participant on a blockchain or in a cryptocurrency, you have what's called a public address and a private key. The way that I explain it to my clients is if you think about the public address being the location of your bank, you can type it into Google Maps. Hey, there's a Wells Fargo here. That's where you can send me my money. A private key is essentially your access to your bank account. So if you think about it like a security safety deposit box or something, whoever holds that key can access the account. So what's critically important whenever we're talking about cryptocurrencies or blockchain in general is keeping control and security of the private key away from anyone who shouldn't have it, because once that's disclosed, it's totally gone. And I have explained this concept of the private key in a seminar that I hosted for a CLE, but if we can just delve into it a little bit more briefly, it's really just a uh, complex cryptographic passcode. It's a string of, I think it's like 24 or 48 different numbers and letter combinations that's extremely difficult for anyone to hack in an ordinary sense. So when I say crypto private key, I'm talking about basically a really long passcode. Now, when we're dealing with crypto assets, a lot of times these are held in what are called wallets. And there's really two different kinds of wallets. There's a hot wallet or a cold wallet. A hot wallet basically just means that it's a wallet that is being held on the internet. It has access to the internet. That could be your ordinary cryptocurrency exchange, which would store your assets for you, or your own ledger that is, or excuse me, your own wallet that is being contained in like a web address, perhaps. And there are ways to really access that. But the other side of the coin, which is where things can get a bit dicey, is the cold wallets. A cold wallet means a wallet that has no access to the internet. It's a physical hardware device. It looks almost like a USB flash drive. There's other ones out there that have different styles, but the main thing that the cold wallet allows is for complete safety and security of the private key. So that private key, the really long passcode, is kept inside that little thumb drive, and you have to have the thumb drive in order to sign or to have transactions take place. So if someone who is dealing with crypto has their private keys for their wallet on a cold wallet, you really need to have physical control of that piece of hardware.
We're going to talk about some of the issues that come up with a divorce because I can very much envision as a divorce lawyer Eric Wolf having like a cold wallet that he doesn't disclose or a crypto that he doesn't disclose. But I want to make sure that listeners can fully understand. And I have a couple questions for you or comments. So is the cold wallet that USB, that thumb drive, is that, everyone's heard these stories about people losing Bitcoin, and one that stood out from that I remember is some guy in England. I used to live in England who had thrown it away, and it was millions of dollars or pounds worth of Bitcoin that got tossed, and then he was sifting through the landfill looking for his USB drive or thumb drive. Is that because he was looking for his cold wallet?
That's right. He probably had his private keys stored somewhere on his computer, and that was the only way to access his account. And going back to this public address situation, he probably saw the millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin available at his public address, but without those private keys, he could not access it. And there's numerous stories of that out
Right.
there. Yeah,
Right. Well, got it. Well, so and then to make sure that listeners can fully understand it. So, is the difference? I know that there's but an overly simplistic way maybe of looking at it is that Ethereum is like a euro or a British pound, and Bitcoin is like a dollar. The currency is the denomination of what it is that is maybe a distinguishing feature, but blockchain, and as far as I understand it, like you go to Wells Fargo, and one of the benefits of Wells Fargo or Alpine Bank or First Bank that is that they carry the ledger. So they keep track of your ledger, but the blockchain is available to everyone. And if you, Anthony, say, Ryan, I'd like to, sell you my car, I can know and build it in different cryptocurrencies like Ethereum. We could have a condition that if you deliver the car to me, that it will be the money will be transferred to you, and that I know that you have the money. Is that accurate?
It's a little bit more nuanced than that. Blockchain is really the underlying technology of just having these distributed ledgers, so to speak. What you're sort of referencing would be a smart contract, where it's essentially self-executing code that is programmed onto the blockchain. Not all cryptocurrencies can do that. Ethereum was really one of the first ones that could do that. And you do hear it referenced as a smart contract functionality. That is where I do believe the cryptocurrency trend is going, because allowing blockchain technology to integrate basically code or programmable code, um, that's really allows a lot more functionality. It's really the basis for something called decentralized finance, which is basically borrowing and lending without really any intermediaries. It's peer-to-peer lending, essentially. It also allows for what are called decentralized autonomous organizations, which you might have heard about. They're becoming a little bit more popular. They're referred to as DAOs. They're essentially self-operating companies that are run wholly on code. And it's some of these issues are things that the law has never seen before. No one really knows how to classify a decentralized autonomous organization or really how to treat decentralized finance. And something that's also been in the news recently is CBDCs, also called central bank digital currencies. The United States government, as well as other countries across the world, are starting to develop their own CBDCs, which is their form of electronic programmable money. So yeah, this is definitely an area where what you're referencing, smart contract, is going to be a major part of blockchain and cryptocurrency in the future.
Well, this whole discussion begs that or raises the issue, and it's fairly esoteric, is what is money?
Yeah,
And I mean, money in and of itself, like when I give you a dollar bill, I mean, at this point, money, I mean, I generally don't carry cash, and it's just numbers on a bank account, but it's something that we believe in. And that we've always not always believed in it, but the history of money is fascinating. It's more for a future discussion, but when people in a divorce get really upset about money, some people can say, listen, it is only money, and ultimately it's something that we have convinced ourselves is important. And now we're looking at this transition from buying into the concept of a dollar in the Federal Reserve, which right now, as we're recording this, we're dealing with interest rates and the access to money and the money supply. And one of the appeals, as far as I understand it, of cryptocurrency is that decision is decentralized. It's not one entity that's making the decision about what something is worth, and there are various benefits to that.
you're exactly right. Each blockchain network or cryptocurrency has within it, and this is getting really technical, but each network has its own set of rules or protocols. So, for example, Bitcoin, there's a set finite amount of Bitcoin that will ever exist in its history or in its future. And what that allows is for scarcity, which is something that makes cryptocurrency attractive to a lot of folks, especially in this day and age of high inflation. So as the Fed keeps messing around with the money supply and turning on the printing press, I do think cryptocurrency is going to be turn to as a more secure and stable asset because of the fact that it has mathematical scarcity built into it. And so that, again, I think that's why I'm so excited about cryptocurrency, because you can really tell that this is going to be an asset that a lot of people are going to think about in the future. And there's a lot of risks that come with that, particularly in the divorce context, because of all this anonymity that's built into it.
Yeah, so Anthony, tell me about how cryptocurrencies can become an issue in divorce proceedings. So if Eric and Melanie Wolf go through a divorce, how could cryptocurrency become an issue in that divorce?
Right. Well, I think one of the main issues that it can cause is if there's an asymmetry of understanding about what's going on with the cryptocurrencies. For example, if one of your hypothetical spouses is really in charge of the money in their relationship, for example, uh, that person might be buying cryptocurrencies or being getting invested in those and not really explaining to their partner or spouse how or what's going on. And so when the divorce happens, it's really incumbent upon the spouse who was really not involved in the finances to, one, understand whether or not they even have cryptocurrencies. Um, for example, a spouse that is particularly adept with cryptocurrencies can hide this stuff, and you might not even know if your spouse has purchased cryptocurrencies. And some of these things could be of considerable value, especially if there's been a lot of appreciation that's occurred. And the other aspect of this is really, if you don't know how to handle cryptocurrencies, you're really putting yourself at risk, even if you do receive some from your spouse. I mean, there's always a risk of losing those private keys. And once you lose the private key, all of that money is either gone completely or it's open to theft. And once it's been stolen, it's really hard to trace that back to a particular scammer or a fraudster, um, or really a thief. And once you've lost the private keys completely, I mean, that's it. Forget it. There's no, not even the FBI or the NSA can help you get those cryptocurrencies back. So those are really the two main areas that I would suggest are of interest to people that are thinking about divorce or going through a divorce. Is one, knowing whether there are cryptocurrencies at issue in the first place, if a spouse has been pretty clandestine or secretive with how they handle those assets, and two, how do you deal with the distribution or separating those things? And actually, a little bit lesser known or less thought of aspect of it would be the tax implications. Um, these are still technically considered um, assets for IRS purposes, so you do have to claim any appreciation as income if they're distributed. Would this be considered a taxable event if it's distributed in a divorce setting? These are all sort of interesting questions that, although they might have solid precedent in sort of the ordinary asset class understandings, it might not be so for crypto, and there is no unified regulatory scheme in the United States for cryptocurrency at the moment. We're sort of running around.
Yeah, and Anthony, I mean that raises certainly, I mean it's something I have thought about. So if Eric Wolf has Bitcoin and he's got a private, a cold wallet with private keys, certainly he's incentivized to and may be tempted not to disclose that. And Melanie may have a very difficult time tracking that down. I mean, we've seen these news reports that my wife grew up in Boulder and she went to high school in Fairview, and there were these guys that she went to high school with who, they were buying islands, they were basically embezzling a ton of money, and it was all through Bitcoin. And everyone has seen these stories because some of the shadow industries, drugs, some other various aspects that sometimes you see where people are working in secret, and in divorce that can come up. And so there's a real issue if Eric is not going to disclose that Bitcoin. But then you get into how much is it worth? And one of the challenges that I have thought about is that these cryptocurrencies, the value can fluctuate dramatically. So it can be worth, 2x one day, and that gives some real issues in a divorce, which you can mitigate that where Eric and Melanie could split, the cryptocurrency in half, and then that mitigates any sort of risk on one person getting a better deal than the other. But then it kind of raises your other issue is what is Melanie? Does she even know what to do with the cryptocurrency? Is it something that she can even, handle or really knows how to address? But yeah, the taxes, the liquidity, and whether or not you can reduce it. You and I were talking before we started recording, and that I've had a couple divorces where their people have invested in Coinbase, and they've invested, in zero point 0.1 Bitcoin, and it looks like a really nice interface where they put money in, but then for them to get cash out is a real challenge. And so the tax implications and other things, and transferring into a divorce under 1041 of the IRS tax code is not a taxable event. And I mean, I'm not a tax attorney, so I've got to give the kind of, disclaimer there. But I mean, Anthony, it's fascinating to address these cutting edge issues because you're right. Like the law, there's no case in Colorado that really addresses how do you value it, what's the appropriate way to handle cryptocurrency. But we're going to start seeing it more and more, and for lawyers that don't know what to do with it, they're really doing their clients a disservice. So someone like you coming in and walking them through those particular issues is a real benefit.
Yes, and one thing I'd also like to point out is I think again this stuff is super fascinating. But with decentralized finance, you're essentially lending out money uh, and perhaps receiving a return. And you might even be involved in what's called staking your cryptocurrencies and receiving a return on that. Now, in the law, it's not even clear whether or not that would be considered income. So, if you have a significant amount of decentralized finance income or staking quote unquote income, does that play into the amount of alimony or child support that needs to be, decided? It's just some of these issues just need to be resolved, and the case law just hasn't caught up to that yet.
Right, the mining of Bitcoin, I know that
Right.
people can mine Bitcoin and then they get additional Bitcoin, but is that income? You're absolutely right. I mean, there's no case that has ever did. It's not under the child support statute under 1410 115, bonuses, trust income, wages. It doesn't say mining Bitcoin, and how that would shake out in court would be interesting. But Anthony, how can you tell people? So, like Eric Wolf and Melanie, they go through divorce. How could Melanie spot whether or not Eric has acquired cryptocurrency? Is there a way that her attorney or her could know if Eric hasn't said, "Hey, I just bought some Ethereum today"?
Well, if they don't just come out and say it, that can cause quite a bit of a problem because you will at some point either need to have access to that person's email address or phone, or you'll need to get them into a deposition and testify under oath, which has its own set of problems. But really, one of the ways that you would catch someone is on these on ramps of trying to, or off ramps, turning their cryptocurrencies back into cash. Uh, and that occurs at an exchange. So, and there's a lot of regulated exchanges out there, Binance, Coinbase, as you mentioned. There's really just a whole list of them. So, if you can find out where Melanie's husband was able to at least conduct any sort of cryptocurrency exchanges at all, either by searching through his email or going through his phone, if that's even a possibility, uh, then you can start getting some traction and figuring out what exactly the assets are, perhaps how much there is, and what the values are. Now, why I say that you need to have access to the phone or the email is because oftentimes to use some of these cryptocurrency exchanges, you have to establish what is called two-factor authentication. Um, to even access your account. And that's just done as a matter of course because there's so much scamming that has gone on in the history of crypto that these cryptocurrencies exchanges require you to have two-factor authentication. So what does that mean for the non-tech savvy? That means that they're going to send you either an email or a text message or something like that to indicate that someone is trying to access your account, and it'll say someone's trying to access your Coinbase account or someone's going to access your Binance account. So that's just like a stealthy way to figure out sort of where the spouse is conducting their activities and really sort of catching them there. There's also, if you have access to the computer, you can look for certain applications that would be like a wallet or a portfolio. So, for example, a really popular cold wallet application is called Ledger, and it has its own application that you can access on the computer. And it really is just looks like a portfolio. It says, hey, you know, you have this many crypto and stuff. So if if you can find those things, um, that is very helpful if you can conduct that investigation. Otherwise, if you don't really have access to that stuff, it's kind of unfortunate, but you would need to either engage the services of a heavy duty uh, what's called chain analysis expert that would go on there and really conduct some, I mean, some sort of proprietary system to deduce to a level of probability whether this person has cryptocurrencies. And that's a really complicated process. Or you can either you can have them testify at a deposition, and the way that you would really do that is if this person's going to lie, you're going to have some knowledge of of what is involved in a cryptocurrency transaction to perhaps catch them in a lie in that situation. So it's really hard to find out if you don't already know, but it is possible.
Yeah, and to I guess put a more context to that. So if Eric and Melanie go through a divorce, both of them under Rule 16.2 have a duty of full transparency, candor, and to disclose whether or not they own any assets, including cryptocurrency. And so there's one issue, and that is if Eric puts on his sworn financial statement that he has Bitcoin or a Coinbase account, and he provides the account number and puts TBD for the value. That's one thing. And then you know the attorney Melanie could serve written discovery and ask for information related to that. Certainly, I mean Amy and I are going to have an episode where we talk about discovery because I think a lot of people and a lot of attorneys miss the availability of digital, the electronically stored information, the digital, so whether it be text messages or the applications, information related to that, getting a phone or a laptop cloned or taking an image of that for analysis. But that is if you know about it, then you can ask additional questions about it. But your real point, like the doomsday aspect of what you're saying, is what happens if Eric tries to hide it and he doesn't even disclose it? How can Melanie and her attorney go and make sure that he to find whatever he may be trying to hide, and because it happens, and identifying those issues to make sure. And it might be looking at bank statements and seeing if there's Binance or Coinbase withdrawals or whatever the case may be, and looking at phones and seeing if there's application software applications, the two-step authentication by Google or somebody else, and seeing is there an account here that might be helpful. Because you're right, Anthony. Oftentimes, Eric and Melanie, there'll be an asymmetry in the information, and especially when it comes to cryptocurrency. You and I were talking before the show that your girlfriend just rolls her eyes or is just so sick of hearing about cryptocurrency. And that might happen where Melanie just tunes it out and doesn't even listen to Eric's investing a lot of money and doesn't realize until they go through a divorce that this stuff could be really, really valuable.
Absolutely. And one of the fears that I would have in the situation as well is what happens if they say I lost it or I don't have access to the private key anymore? I mean, that's a real concern as well. I mean, how do you test these statements? It's really difficult. But one of the things that, and going back to one of the points you made, is looking at the bank statements. The way that you transfer initial money onto an exchange is either by wire or by ACH, and most of the times it's by wire. So that will definitely show up on there.
No, so oftentimes, just so people understand, Anthony, is they are converting cash, US dollars, oftentimes into cryptocurrency. And then from there, it's kind of an open season because they can go from Bitcoin to Ethereum or a whole host of different cryptocurrencies. And if they converted $100,000 into Bitcoin 5 years ago, it's going to be worth a different amount than $100,000. And whether it's now all of a sudden worthless, or they claim it's worthless, or it's worth, $2 million, those are issues that you're really going to have to deal with in divorce. But you got to first understand that it's even there to begin with.
Right. And once you can get that toehold into where they're keeping their assets or even what is the public address of their wallet, your life then becomes a bit easier because I will remind you that all of this is there's an associated public address. So you will be able to essentially track where the money is going to in terms of it's not going to say this money to Bitcoin has gone from Eric to someone else, but it will say this public address is sending to Bitcoin to this other public address. So then you can perform some additional investigation. So once you can get access to at least some basic information about the the wallet or the exchange, you're going to have some additional records that you can then use to sort of figure out what happened to the money. And going back to the point of valuation, at least with these cryptocurrency exchanges, they should be able to provide you historical records of how much Bitcoin was purchased at a particular price or on a particular day. Because a lot of times people, they won't just buy a large chunk of a currency at one time. They'll add $100 here, $1,000 here, whatever. So it's really helpful to see all of that information, and you can get that from the exchanges.
Yeah, and to give people an idea, I went skiing with some guys who were living in Puerto Rico. They were Americans, and they were crypto bros. They had purportedly $1 billion each in crypto, and they were going to Puerto Rico because there were no income taxes there, and so they were avoiding the taxes. And if they went through a divorce, certainly there might be some issues. But if they were to reduce hypothetically their $1 billion to uh, US dollars, there would be some tax consequences. So if Eric was a crypto billionaire, then in Melanie wanted no part with his crypto, then and just wanted cold hard cash, there'd be some tax implications. So Anthony, finally, why don't we just wrap this up and talk about some of the difficulties and risks associated with identifying and accounting for cryptocurrency that we haven't already covered, because we've identified many issues. Are there any more that lawyers should understand in terms of security or other issues that may arise with cryptocurrency in a divorce in Colorado?
Absolutely. And when I talk about this stuff, I usually gear it towards the lawyers because it's easy to forget that you can also, as a lawyer, get in trouble for handling this stuff because it's so easy to lose access to a wallet that could contain significant amounts of money for your clients. If, for example, they entrust you with the private keys and you're the only one apparently that would have the private keys, if you lose those, now you're exposing yourself to some sort of liability as a lawyer. So there's all of these different sort of best practices that I would suggest for lawyers in this space. If there are any listening right now, One would be to never personally uh, agree to handle or to store your client's cryptocurrencies, because there's always the risk that you will be looked upon with suspicion if those assets go missing somehow. And if you had ever come in contact with those keys, because I tend to reiterate this, anyone who has access to the private keys at any point, either by taking a picture of them, by having them, by recording it in a video and then freeze framing it, any of those sort of spy type ways of seeing the private key, that person now potentially could steal the cryptocurrencies. So my advice to lawyers really is just don't handle those keys if you can help it. Really just advise your clients on how to handle this stuff, but don't take it yourself. You just really want to avoid any malpractice in that situation. And again, stressing the the security aspect to your clients and making sure that they understand what exactly it is that they are keeping charge of, because it's like you're your own bank now. You are really in charge of your own security. So if you have $100,000 of Bitcoin in your wallet and it's yours, no one can take that from you unless you are being really sloppy with the way that you handle your keys. And in fact, there's many different articles about the FBI or other agencies being able to recover millions of dollars worth of stolen crypto. And a lot of times it has to do with the hackers themselves having sloppy private key access, and the FBI is able to get a hold of it. So, really making sure that you don't underestimate how much security is going to be involved with this. Because once you start advertising to anyone that you have cryptocurrencies or that you deal with that stuff, you really open yourself up to potential attack from other people. And I have a friend of mine specifically who's uh, involved in the government, and he is aware of all of these risks, and he's the one who basically tells me like, don't don't even let 1% um, of your attention slip when it comes to dealing with this stuff.
I think that's really helpful for both, clients like Eric who are going through a divorce that, if his attorney doesn't ask for the private keys, or the other attorney, Melanie's attorney, asks and they don't realize what they're asking for, just really educating them. But divorce attorneys, we deal with some really sensitive information with tax returns, with bank information, and this is just one element. I think it's helpful for attorneys and clients alike to understand the importance of security. It's something that we frequently talk on about here on Divorce at Altitude, but Anthony, I think it's really important to highlight how important that those issues are, because there needs to be full disclosure, but that full disclosure might not, it might, you might not want to actually get the keys to the kingdom, because if you lose them, then you could be on the hook, and it might not be beneficial for anyone. Because if, Russian hackers or somebody comes in and, takes the Bitcoin, then neither Eric nor Melanie has it anymore. And that is something that it would be a risk that is avoidable.
That's exactly right. I advise some folks in probate law, and I also tell them don't put your private keys in any public documents, like a will that will one day be, um, you know, put into the record. Same thing with this. If there's some sort of decree that the parties agree to, like some sort of settlement, don't put the private keys in there. Keep that as a separate document if kept in a document form at all. Um, so yeah, absolutely.
Well, Anthony, if there are attorneys or Eric or Melanie Wolf, they want to find out more about how you could help with advising them in a cryptocurrency situation with a divorce, what's the best place to reach out to you? And we'll have links to your bio and your phone number in the show notes for people. But for those just listening, how's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way would really be by email. You can email me directly at agarcia at agarcialegal.com. Otherwise, you can go onto my website and just take a look around. I do have some materials for lawyers that are involved in the space. Just a questionnaire, perhaps, that you could ask your clients to see if it's going to be an issue. And I do book cryptocurrency consultations, so that's also available on my website.
Well, Anthony, thank you for the tutorial on cryptocurrency, and we really appreciate the time and the insight. Until next time, thanks for joining us on Divorce at Altitude.
Thank you.